Hey, I just sent you a divorce agreement. It's the one my wife and I signed on our wedding day. Can you check if there's any issue with it? Harrison stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, absent-mindedly rubbing the edge of his phone. Harrison, I looked over the agreement. There's no problem. The lawyer's professional voice came through the phone. There's 1 month left until the 3-year term is up. Once it expires, the agreement takes effect automatically. You can just go to the Civil Affairs office to get the divorce certificate. All right, thanks. Hanging up, Harrison looked up at the wedding photo on the wall. In the photo, he was wearing a white suit, smiling contentedly. Standing beside him, Judy in her white wedding dress looked beautiful, but there was not even a hint of a smile. Love or lack thereof, it was obvious. The day is almost here. You must be so happy, he muttered to himself, lightly tracing the woman's cool face in the photo. The sound of a key turning in the lock made Harrison quickly pull back his hand and turn to meet her. Back already. He took Judy's coat and crouched down to help her change into slippers. The movement so practiced it was like he'd rehearsed them 1,000 times. Judy rubbed her temples, face calm. Next month, the White's anniversary celebration is happening. You need to attend the dinner party. Harrison paused in organizing the coat and shook his head. I can't make it. Why not? Judy frowned. Harrison was about to speak when Judy seemed to realize something. Her gaze turned cold. Is it because I've been spending time with Lucas? I told you on our wedding day, I have someone I love. You said you wouldn't interfere. Harrison's heart throbbed sharply, as if something had ripped it open. Yeah, who else's wife would tell her new husband she loves someone else and sign a deal for a divorce in 3 years? He was just giving her what she wanted. By next month, he'd be gone, so he couldn't go to the dinner. 3 years ago, the Smiths and the Whites, 2 prominent families, announced their upcoming union in marriage. Harrison had had a crush on Judy since childhood, and he was overjoyed to learn he could marry her. Yet, on their wedding night, Judy handed him a divorce agreement. I have someone I love, but his family situation is ordinary. The Whites wouldn't approve. She spoke plainly, I'm going to spend 3 years becoming the head of the Whites. By then, no one will dare oppose. The next 3 years we'll pretend to be married, then divorce when the time comes. That night, Harrison signed, just as she wanted, but spent the entire night smoking on the balcony. Less than 3 months after their marriage, Lucas disappeared without a trace after a spat with Judy. Judy feverishly searched for him, using all her connections, but could never find a lead. During that time, she'd stay out all night, come home drunk, with an ominously darkened gaze. Until one late night, she came home utterly hammered, collapsed into his arms on the bed. Her kisses came with a strong scent of alcohol, yet she said, Lucas, why did you leave? Why are you with someone else? Don't you trust me? Harrison went rigid, heart gripped painfully. So she found him, but Lucas had already moved on. That night was their first, but Judy held him tight, calling out someone else's name all night. The next morning, she caught sight of the blood stain on the sheets with a blank look but said nothing. Harrison acted as if nothing happened, prepared fresh clothes for her, even gently reminded her of an important meeting before she left. He pretended all was fine, though inside he was bleeding. After that, he was even more cautious in his kindness toward her. She had a sensitive stomach, so he'd wake early to make her soothing porridge. She was stressed at work, so he learned to give massages to ease her fatigue. She liked quiet, so he never made a noise in front of her, even walked softly. Gradually, Judy seemed to treat him like a husband. She started bringing him little gifts when returning from trips. She'd make him a cup of cold medicine when he was sick. She'd even crawl into bed with him at night, hand resting softly on his waist as she slept. Judy never brought up the divorce again, as if the agreement ceased to exist. Harrison foolishly thought perhaps she might really fall in love with him, until 3 months ago when Lucas broke up and came back. Judy almost instantly returned to him. She ate with him, shopped with him, even skipped important meetings just because Lucas was in a bad mood. Harrison stood by the window watching Judy's car head toward Lucas's apartment again, and finally understood. True love is true love. No matter how much he gave, It couldn't surpass a single look from Lucas. Thankfully, the 3-year marriage of convenience was finally ending. He told himself it was like a dream. Now that he's awake, it's time to leave. Why so silent? Judy's voice broke his thoughts. Harrison stared blankly at her, throat constricted. She didn't remember the divorce agreement? He had counted every day of those 3 years, afraid she'd leave once the time was up, but now she seemed to have completely forgotten. He opened his mouth to remind her, but Judy's phone rang suddenly. As soon as she answered, Lucas's voice came through. Harrison couldn't hear what he was saying, but saw Judy's expression change dramatically. "Wait for me, I'm coming." She hung up, grabbed her keys, and rushed out so quickly that she crashed into him. Harrison staggered, hitting the door frame, and let out a pained grunt. Judy didn't even turn back, already disappearing out the door. Harrison leaned against the wall, slowly walked back to the bedroom, took off his coat, revealing a bruise on his shoulder. He pulled out a first aid kit, silently applying the ointment, as if something were slicing through his heart. He sat on the bed, dazedly watching the sky outside darken until his phone rang. It was Judy. "Come to the downtown hospital." Harrison's heart skipped, instinctively asking, "What happened?" "Come here, I'll explain." When Harrison arrived, he saw Judy standing at the operating room's door with Lucas leaning on her side, eyes red. Harrison halted, feeling his chest tighten painfully, making it hard to breathe. "What's going on?" He walked over and asked softly. Judy looked up at him. "Lucas's mother has acute leukemia and needs an immediate bone marrow transplant." Harrison froze. "And then? We've searched the whole city, but there's no match." Judy said flatly, "I've done a match test, and it matches." Harrison's pupils contracted, staring at her in disbelief. "You're going to donate your bone marrow?" "Donating bone marrow has risks, I didn't call you here for your approval." Judy interrupted, "The surgery needs family consent." "Family?" Harrison's heart wrenched in pain. "Yeah, legally he's her husband. But in her heart, her family was never him." Harrison clenched his fists so tightly, his nails almost digging into his palms. "Okay," he heard himself say. "I'll sign." The nurse handed over the consent form. He signed each letter carefully, as if etching onto his heart. Judy released Lucas, turning toward the operating room. With the door about to close, Harrison couldn't help calling her name. "Judy!" She turned, eyes indifferent. Harrison's lips trembled, but he only whispered, "Be careful." Judy's eyes flickered slightly, but she said nothing, turning back into the operating room. When the door closed, Harrison's tears finally fell. He realized Judy's love for Lucas ran so deep, she'd give up her life for him. The operating room light stayed on, the hallway silent except for their breathing. Harrison sat on a bench, fingertips icy. Lucas sat across, eyes red, occasionally looking toward the operating room. Eventually, Lucas spoke softly. "Harrison, I'm sorry to trouble you again." Harrison looked up at him, silent. Lucas wiped his eyes, choking up. "I never thought, after all these years, Judy would still love me so deeply." He paused, lost in thought. "Did you know? On my birthday last year, she flew to Paris just to get me a watch I once mentioned liking. She actually remembered, but I was still mad at her, tossed the watch back, and never let her in." Harrison's fingers tightened, nails biting into his palm. He remembered clearly, Judy had told him she was going on a short business trip. When she returned, she handed him a watch as a random gift. He cherished it, storing it in the drawer's deepest spot, too precious to wear. But it turned out it was what Lucas had rejected, something she casually passed on to him. Lucas continued, "And remember the Christmas before last? I had a huge fight with my girlfriend back then and posted something really negative on social media. Judy saw it and flew over that night. She stood outside my apartment building in the heavy snow but never dared to knock on my door." Harrison felt a sharp pain in his heart. He remembered that Christmas night. Judy was uncharacteristically affectionate, wanting him 7 times, making him think she finally fell for him. When he woke up the next day, the spot beside him was already cold. He thought she had some urgent work to attend to. Turns out, she was rushing to see Lucas. It's been 3 years. Tears rolled down Lucas's face again. I was too proud to contact her, but Judy never forgot about me, writing me a letter every day even though I never replied. Harrison suddenly felt it hard to breathe. How many late nights did he see the light on in the study, thinking she was working on company files and made her coffee? Turns out she was writing love letters to Lucas. He always believed that at least while Lucas was gone, Judy genuinely wanted to be with him. Now he realized it was all just his wishful thinking. He thought her heart had warmed up to him, but her thoughts were all on someone else. Seeing Lucas about to continue, Harrison suddenly stood up. His face was pale, almost transparent, but he forced his voice to stay steady. I've got something to do. I'm leaving. Before Lucas could respond, he turned and walked away quickly, his pace increasing until he was almost fleeing. Back home, he silently packed all his things, just waiting for the day the divorce papers were due. During this time, he could see Judy's updates in Lucas's social media daily. Her surgery was successful, yet she didn't take a break, immediately arranging the best hospital room for Lucas's mom, bringing in top-notch medical teams from abroad, and personally overseeing every treatment plan. Lucas's latest post was a photo. Judy was sitting by his hospital bed, receiving in 4 while peeling a pomegranate for him. His caption read, "Could never find someone who loves me this much again." Harrison's heart ached fiercely. Tears fell on his phone's screen, blurring the gentle side profile of Judy in the picture. He remembered how he'd taken care of her all these years. Her stomach was bad, and he made porridge to nourish it every day. She was busy, so he'd always wait up for her with the lights on. The fruit he brought her was always peeled, pitted, and cut to just the right size. But now, she was doing all this for someone else. He took a deep breath, wiped away his tears, and told himself, it's okay. After not loving her, he'd learned to love himself better. A week later, Judy suddenly came home. Harrison was surprised. She should have been at Lucas's side every moment. "Family dinner tonight. Change your clothes," she said briefly. Harrison understood, silently changed into formal attire, and followed her out. At the family dinner, people drank and chatted nonstop. The conversation naturally shifted to her and Judy. "You've been married for 3 years. It's time for a kid." "Yeah, Judy is head of the family now. We need an heir." "Harrison, you need to step it up." Harrison kept his eyes down, listening in silence, absent-mindedly rubbing the rim of his glass. Then Judy, who hadn't spoken the whole evening, suddenly spoke up. No rush. Her voice wasn't loud, but it instantly quieted the whole room. Everyone's expressions changed, but given Judy's current status, no one dared to say more. The atmosphere became tense, and the dinner finally ended in awkward silence. After dinner, Maria stood up, eyeing Harrison sharply. "Harrison, come to the study with me." Everyone knew she was going to pressure him about having kids. Judy clearly saw it too, frowning. "Anything you have to say can be said to me." Maria was about to speak when Judy's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID. Her expression shifted, and she immediately stepped aside to answer it, speaking in a gentleness never seen before. "Lucas? What's up?" Maria snorted coldly and directed to Harrison. "Come with me." Harrison pressed his lips together, silently followed. Once the study door was closed, Maria's face darkened. "Kneel." Harrison slowly knelt on the cold marble floor. "You know what you did wrong?" Maria looked down at him. Harrison lowered his gaze, staying silent. Maria slammed the table. "Judy says she's not in a rush to have kids, and you didn't try to talk her into it," she exclaimed. She pulled a porcelain bottle from the drawer and slammed it down on the table. "This is fertility medicine. Starting today, you drink it every day and be with Judy until she gets pregnant." In the past, Harrison would have obediently taken it. But this time he looked up, his voice soft but firm. "I'm not taking this." Maria's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I'm not taking it. Judy doesn't want kids right now, and I respect her decision." For years, every time they were together, Judy took precautions. Even when things got out of hand, she would take the morning after pill right away. He'd naively thought she just wanted to wait. Now he realized she never wanted kids with him. Since he'd already decided to leave, he definitely wasn't going to tie himself to her with a child. What did you say? Maria's voice rose sharply. I'm not taking it, Harrison repeated. You're out of line. Maria was trembling with anger. You're her husband, and you're not doing your duty. Judy donated bone marrow to that Lucas's mom, and you didn't stop her. She shouted for the family whip to be brought out. Soon, a servant handed over the whip, soaked in salt water. Maria stood with the whip in hand. I'll ask one last time. Will you take it? Harrison shook his head. Whack. The first lash hit, the fiery pain spreading instantly from his back to his entire body. Harrison gritted his teeth, cold sweat soaking his shirt. Are you going to take it now? Harrison still shook his head, teeth clenched. The whip came down again and again. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, Harrison saw Judy in the garden, still on the phone. Her back to the study, looking relaxed with the occasional chuckle, clearly enjoying her chat with Lucas. Fine. I'll beat it into you what a son-in-law's duty in the White family is. The whip tore through his clothes, leaving bloody welts. Harrison trembled with pain but wouldn't give in. I won't take it, he said, blood staining his clothes, his vision blurring. The last sight he saw was Judy's back as she continued her call. Before darkness consumed him, Harrison thought, it's for the best. After this last time, I won't ever hurt for her again. When Harrison woke, he was in a hospital bed. He heard the respectful voice of the director nearby. Judy, Harrison's whip wounds are deep. Some have reached the dermal layer. Use the best medicine and bring in the best doctors. Don't let him scar. Judy's voice was cold. Yes, we'll do our utmost. After the director left, Judy turned to see Harrison was awake. She quickly walked to his bedside, frowning slightly. How are you feeling? Harrison tried to move. The burn of the wounds made him wince. I'm fine. They're taking good care of me here. If you have things to do, go ahead. Surprisingly, Judy didn't leave. She sat by his side with a complicated look in her eyes. Why didn't you call for me when Mother was giving you a hard time? He remembered the sight of her focused on her call with Lucas, and gave a bitter smile. You seemed busy. He paused, then asked softly, if I had called you, would you really have come right away? Of course, Judy replied without hesitation. Harrison was stunned. The answer he got was totally different from what he expected. I've taken care of the family stuff, she continued. There won't be anyone bothering you about the child anymore. Got it. Harrison looked down. You can go ahead and get busy. Why do you keep pushing me away? Judy furrowed her brow. Harrison looked a bit surprised. Aren't you busy? Busy with work stuff and spending time with Lucas. Not busy lately. She reached out and tucked the blanket around him. I can take care of you for a few days. This was totally unexpected for Harrison. In the days that followed, Judy actually stayed at the hospital taking care of him. She adjusted his hospital bed, fed him, and even changed his bandages herself. One night when his pain kept him awake, Judy sat by the bed, gently patting his back until he fell asleep like a child. This tenderness took Harrison back to their most intimate times. But he wouldn't indulge again. He had made up his mind to leave without looking back. A week later, the whip marks on Harrison's back had faded quite a bit. That day, while Judy was applying ointment on his back, he accidentally let out a groan. Her movements suddenly stopped. Harrison turned back in confusion, only to see her eyes dark and lips pressed tight. Her legs. His expression changed slightly. Judy started leaning closer, her breathing becoming more erratic. As their lips were about to touch, smack! A sharp noise shattered the tension in the hospital room. They both turned their heads to see Lucas standing at the door. The fruit basket he was holding had fallen, fruit rolling everywhere. His eyes were red, his voice trembling. Am I interrupting something? Judy quickly pushed Harrison away. Lucas, it's not what you think. Her movements were so abrupt that Harrison fell back unprepared, rolling off the bed. With a thud, the back of his head hit the corner of the nightstand hard. Blood immediately started flowing. I won't bother you. Lucas turned and ran. Lucas! Judy didn't even glance at Harrison lying on the ground. She chased after Lucas without hesitation. Harrison lay there, vision blurry from the blood. He suddenly laughed, tears streaming down his face. When the nurse found him, he'd already fainted again from blood loss. In his last conscious moments, he heard the nurse shouting in panic, "Patient head injury. Call the doctor." And Judy never came back. Because of the head injury, Harrison had to extend his hospital stay for a few more days. Judy never showed up again. He knew she was probably busy calming Lucas, so he never called her even once or sent a single message. On the day of his discharge, the housekeeper called about plans for Judy's birthday party. Harrison held his phone silent for a long time. Every year before, Judy's birthday was something he organized himself. The Whites might have been a wealthy family, but warmth wasn't part of the package. Her parents didn't even know she was allergic to peanuts and would get a cake with peanut butter every year. He remembered the first year he'd attended her birthday party. He caught her secretly taking her allergy medication. "Why not just tell them?" he asked, feeling bad for her. "No need." She had replied indifferently, "They care more about the company's financial report than this." Ever since then, he took it upon himself to prepare her birthday celebrations. Every dish, every bouquet, was tailored to her liking. She no longer had to face decorations she hated or worry about mistakenly eating food she was allergic to. "Sir?" the housekeeper prompted over the phone. Harrison took a deep breath. "I'll handle it. This would be the last time." After the divorce, someone else would take over organizing her birthday. He planned it meticulously like in previous years, but this time he made sure the housekeeper followed it all carefully, explaining every detail. The cake must be black forest, no peanut butter. Use white roses instead of red. She hates those. No tequila on the drink list, it gives her headaches. Remember it well, next time when you're organizing, don't mess it up. The housekeeper asked, puzzled, "You won't be handling it next time, sir?" Harrison lowered his lashes, didn't reply. Next time, he wouldn't even be a son-in-law of the Whites anymore. How could it still be his responsibility? On the night of the birthday party, the place was filled with well-dressed people and well-lit surroundings. Harrison stood at the entrance in a dark blue suit greeting guests when he saw Judy walk in slowly with Lucas on her arm. Judy was dazzling in a red, strapless, mermaid-style gown, following Lucas into the room. At that moment, Harrison realized she had already pacified Lucas. Judy's eyes were glued to Lucas the whole time. When his glass was empty, she quickly had it refilled. If his collar was slightly off, she'd fix it herself. Whenever he tasted something delicious and his eyes crinkled in delight, she couldn't help but smile gently. She never once looked at Harrison. Harrison stood quietly in a corner, attending to guests like a diligent butler. During the gift opening session, guests presented priceless treasures. Harrison's gift, a limited edition necklace, was carefully placed on a silver tray. Harrison has great taste. This necklace is one of only 10 in the world. It matches Judy perfectly. They sure understand Judy's style as a couple. Judy glanced at Harrison, apparently pleased, and said a simple, "Thank you." But when Lucas's gift was opened, the room went silent for a moment. It was a hand-knitted beige scarf, with wonky stitches, clearly made by a novice. Someone couldn't help but laugh, saying, "In this day and age, who gives a handmade scarf? Judy might be allergic to such cheap yarn. Who's this guy anyway? Dressed so modestly. How did he even get in here?" Lucas's face turned pale, and he instinctively took a step back. Judy's expression darkened instantly. She picked up the scarf and wrapped it around her neck in front of everyone. "I love this gift," she said, her voice gentle yet commanding, quieting the room. "I cherish handmade efforts more than expensive items." Then she picked up the necklace Harrison had given her and coldly remarked, "As for this, though costly, it lacks heart." The sound of the necklace being tossed into the trash was piercing. The entire banquet hall went eerily quiet before erupting in agreement. Judy is right. Handmade gifts have warmth. A watch doesn't compare. This scarf stitching is so unique. This gentleman has quite the skill. Harrison stood there, feeling as if all his blood had frozen. A necklace that had taken him 3 months to find after visiting numerous boutiques in several countries was now discarded like trash, just to back Lucas. Now that he thought about it, hasn't this been happening a lot lately? She could skip important meetings for Lucas but forget Harrison's birthday. She could stay up all night for a sick Lucas but not call when Harrison had a fever. She'd fly halfway around the world for a word from Lucas but didn't have time for a meal with Harrison. Every time, she'd choose Lucas without hesitation, just like she decided to throw away his gift today. Harrison gently touched his chest, where his heart once beat fervently for her, now calm like still water. Turns out, loving someone can indeed drain you dry. The initial excitement, expectations, and heartbreak, everything wore out with each of her choices. He wouldn't feel sad for her anymore because his heart felt empty. Next, everyone in the room focused on Lucas. The same people who mocked him moments ago now swarmed him with attention. Harrison gave a small smile from the corner. That's the way of high society. With just one look from Judy, everyone flocked to him. It was just as well. After all, post-divorce, Judy would likely let Lucas take over the Whites, and now she was just preparing for that transition. The party wound down, guests began to leave. Harrison stood at the door, bidding farewell with a polite smile, still acting as the impeccable son-in-law of the Whites. When the last guest left, he finally breathed out a little, only to turn and see Judy and Lucas standing by the entrance. Outside, it was pouring, the rain forming a curtain, and cold winds carrying moisture inside. Lucas shivered and sneezed. Judy frowned and quickly draped her shawl over him. Still cold, Lucas shivered again. Judy's eyes landed on Harrison. Draped over his arm was a cashmere scarf, its soft ivory texture glowing gently under the light. "Give Lucas your scarf," she ordered. Harrison's fingers quivered, and his face turned even paler. "This is from my grandmother. I know it was handmade by your late grandma." Judy cut him off. "Lucas just needs it temporarily. There's no need to be so petty." Harrison's throat tightened as he clung to the edge of his scarf, but finally, he slowly let go and took it off. He knew even if he didn't hand it over, Judy would make someone take it from him. When he passed it over, Lucas took it with an apologetic smile, saying, "Thanks, I'll wash it and return it to you." "No." Harrison quickly shook his head, warning him repeatedly that it needed dry cleaning. "I'll have someone pick it up tomorrow." Lucas nodded, "Got it." Just then, the driver pulled up, stopping steadily at the door. Judy looked at Lucas, noticing he seemed pale. She frowned slightly and turned to Harrison. "Lucas caught a cold. I'll take him home first." "Go home by yourself, it's not on the way." Without waiting for Harrison to respond, she and Lucas got in the car. The door shut, the engine roared to life, and the black car disappeared into the rain, leaving Harrison standing alone as rain splashed on his shoes. The street was deserted in the downpour. It took him 40 minutes in the cold wind to finally hail a cab. By the time he got home, he was soaked and felt dizzy. His forehead was blazing. He took medicine for his fever and collapsed onto the bed, falling asleep immediately. In the middle of the night, his phone kept buzzing. Yet, his headache was so intense, he couldn't muster the strength to even lift his hand. Kept vibrating until it went silent. The next day, his fever broke, but his throat felt like it had been scorched. He propped himself up and took a sip of water before reaching for his phone. Every unread message was from Lucas. He opened them, and the first image shocked him. His precious cashmere scarf was completely soaked. Its once soft fleece was matted and misshapen. More messages popped up one after another. "Sorry, I forgot the scarf shouldn't get wet and soaked it as soon as I got home. I'm really sorry. How much was it? I'll compensate you. The material's great, it can be a cloth or something. If you don't respond, I'll assume you agree. Okay? I'll compensate you $30 since you said it was handmade by your grandma. That should cover it, right?" The last image showed the scarf shredded to pieces, with strips hanging at the edges as if someone had purposely destroyed it. Harrison's fingers shook with rage as he flipped the covers off, not caring about his lingering fever, and dashed out the door. At Lucas's apartment, Harrison rang the doorbell. His eyes were cold. The door opened to Lucas in loungewear, surprised to see him. Harrison? What are you doing here? My scarf, Harrison demanded icily. Lucas turned, picked up the shredded scarf from the sofa, and asked, You mean this? Didn't I pay for it already? He glanced at his phone. Haven't you accepted the $30? Too little? I'll send another 20. It's handmade. Shouldn't be too pricey. Smack! Harrison slapped Lucas hard across the face, making him stumble back, clutching his cheek in disbelief. You hit me? Harrison glared, enunciating each word. You did this on purpose, didn't you? Lucas's eyes reddened. On purpose? I don't know what you're talking about. You came back on purpose. You called Judy when your mom needed a marrow donor on purpose. You said things outside the surgery room on purpose. You barged in while Judy and I kissed on purpose, and now ruined my scarf on purpose. Harrison stepped closer, his voice freezing. Lucas, I've seen through your tricks. Just because I don't speak up doesn't mean I'll always tolerate your insults. Lucas's face paled, defensively saying, I didn't do anything. Really? Harrison was about to speak again when an icy voice interrupted from the doorway. Harrison, what are you doing? He jerked around to see Judy standing there, her expression dark and ominous. Judy strode to Lucas, gently touching the red mark on his face, eyes filled with concern. He hit you? What happened? Lucas, eyes red, recounted the incident, and Judy's expression darkened further. It's just a scarf. Is it worth hitting someone over? She turned to Harrison as she asked coldly. It's not just a scarf. Harrison's voice trembled. Judy, that was all I had from my grandmother. Judy was taken aback. In 3 years of marriage, Harrison had always been gentle and mild, never raising his voice. But now, his flushed eyes and trembling shoulders made him seem like a stranger. Lucas didn't mean to, she softened, and he's compensated you. What more do you want? If you're unhappy with the compensation, I'll do it. She pulled out her checkbook, scribbled a number flamboyantly, and handed it over. Is this enough? Harrison looked at the check in Judy's hand. It felt like an invisible hand squeezed his heart, making it hard to breathe. When he didn't take it, she frowned, tore up that check, and wrote another. Not enough. Her voice was indifferent, as if negotiating a deal. What about this? Check after check piled up before him, amounts increasing, but his heart felt only colder. Eventually, he took the last one, his hand trembling. Enough, his voice was faint, yet it felt like he gave everything he had. Judy, not only is this check enough, but so is our marriage. Without another word, he turned to leave, but before he could take 2 steps, Judy's chilling voice called out, Stop. Harrison stopped in his tracks but didn't turn around. You got the money, but about that slap, we're not done. Her tone was firm. Apologize to Lucas. Harrison froze and slowly turned, his eyes red. What did you say? I said, apologize. Judy's expression was icy. What if I don't? His voice trembled. The Smiths and the Whites still have business together. Judy's voice was calm, but her words were sharp. Harrison's pupils contracted, feeling a stabbing pain in his chest. He never imagined she'd threaten him with his parents' hard work. Time seemed to stand still for a few seconds. Finally, Harrison lowered his head, speaking hoarsely. I'm sorry. Lucas covered his face, pretending to be earnest. Harrison, is your apology sincere? Or is that how you high society people apologize? Harrison clenched his fists tightly, his nails digging into his palms. Then, he suddenly bent over and deeply bowed to Lucas. I'm sorry. His voice was choked but clear. Lucas, I shouldn't have hit you. Please forgive me. After that, he straightened up and looked at Judy. Is that enough? Judy stared at his reddened eyes and felt a slight pang in her heart. She remembered 3 years ago, when he had a high fever. He looked at her with the same red eyes, full of trust and love. Now all that was left was a lifeless calm. Her throat tightened, wanting to say something, but she simply said coldly, That's enough. Harrison turned and left, his back straight, without hesitation. Behind him, Judy's gentle voice said, Does it still hurt? Let me put some medicine on it. Lucas replied softly, It hurts, be gentle. Harrison didn't stop walking. Tears silently slid down his face, but he quickly wiped them away, leaving no trace. In the following days, Judy didn't come home, and Harrison didn't call once. Until the day the divorce agreement took effect, he went to the Civil Affairs Bureau alone. When the staff handed him the divorce certificate, he took it calmly. His fingers gently brushed over the gilded words, feeling no emotion. As he left the office, the sky was still bright. He hailed a cab to go to the White's villa to gather his last belongings. But when he opened the door, he found Judy at home. "Where have you been?" She stood in the living room, elegantly dressed. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, she said knowingly, "Today is our anniversary. Were you out getting a gift?" Harrison froze and suddenly remembered. Yes, it was their anniversary. 3 years ago today, they exchanged rings with everyone's blessings. But that night, she handed him a divorce agreement, saying it was just a business marriage and he should not take it seriously. It would end in 3 years. Ironically, the day he held the divorce certificate was the same day as their anniversary. And Judy thinking he was out getting a gift made sense. Every year, he prepared gifts she loved, even if she never remembered the day. Why did she remember this year? Did she not recall today was also the end of their divorce agreement? Thoughts swirled in Harrison's mind, but he simply clutched the divorce certificate in his bag and nodded. "Yeah, I was getting a gift." The divorce certificate counted as a gift. Judy nodded indifferently. "Tomorrow, I'm taking Lucas to Switzerland to ski, so let's celebrate our anniversary today." She glanced at her watch. "I reserved the top floor at La Maison. Give the gift later. Let's go." She grabbed her jacket from the chair and turned to leave. Harrison didn't move. She looked back, frowning. "What are you waiting for?" Harrison opened his mouth but didn't say he was leaving. After a pause, he blurted out, "I have something to handle. You go first, I'll meet you later." Luckily, Judy didn't notice anything wrong and left with a quiet hum. Harrison stood by the window, watching her black car leave. It was the first year she remembered their anniversary, but his first year not caring. He took out the new divorce certificate and placed it on the coffee table, then picked up his packed bags, closed the door gently, and left. The divorce certificate lay quietly there, next to the check he never cashed. Sunlight streamed through the window onto it, the zeros blinding, unable to buy a handmade shawl or 3 years of love. The lights at La Maison were still bright. Judy checked her watch again, frowning. "Judy, should I call Harrison?" the manager asked respectfully. "No." Judy shook her head. She checked her phone. No reply from Harrison. It wasn't like him. He always replied instantly to her messages. She left the restaurant. The night breeze brushed her face, and a feeling of unease washed over her. When she pushed open the door, the room was dead silent. Judy frowned, looking around. 2 things on the coffee table caught her attention immediately: a divorce certificate and the check she had given him. Judy's pupils dilated, and her heart felt like it was gripped by an invisible hand. She almost trembled as she picked up the divorce certificate, checking the date over and over. It was today. "Harrison," she murmured to herself, unaware of the panic in her own voice. Suddenly, her phone rang loudly. The screen showed the name Lucas. "Judy," Lucas's cheerful voice came through. "Where are you? I made your favorite. Can you come over and keep me company?" "At home," Judy replied instinctively, her eyes still glued to the divorce paper. "Then I'll bring it to you now," Lucas said enthusiastically, hanging up before she could refuse. 20 minutes later, Lucas walked into the living room and immediately saw the divorce papers on the table. "Oh my God," he exclaimed dramatically, taking a couple of steps back. "What does this mean? Is he divorcing you?" Judy sat on the sofa, expressionless, and nodded. A smug look briefly flashed across Lucas's eyes, but he quickly replaced it with a worried expression. He sat gently beside Judy, his eyes slightly wet. "I'm so sorry, Judy. Is he still mad that I accidentally ruined his shawl? I know guys can get really jealous, but I didn't think he'd use a divorce to threaten you." Judy's fingers unknowingly traced the edge of the divorce certificate. For the first time, she didn't try to comfort him. Judy? Lucas tilted his head, a bit anxious. Are you reluctant to let him go? Maybe I should apologize, I can even beg him. Reluctant? Not a chance. Judy scoffed, her tone dripping with deliberate disdain. Nothing more than a tool for marriage connections. Don't overthink. It's not your fault to begin with, you didn't do it on purpose. Satisfied, Lucas smirked slightly, wrapping an arm around her waist to gently pull her in. Honestly, I've always thought he was too boring for someone like you. Judy tensed briefly, then relaxed, reaching over to ruffle Lucas's hair. But Lucas suddenly sat up, looking puzzled. Why wouldn't he take the check? Did he find someone else? Judy's eyes went cold instantly. Oh, I was just kidding. Lucas quickly waved his hands. With his personality, who'd want him? He's probably just trying to make you give in. Obviously, he loves you so much. Judy stood up, walked to the liquor cabinet, and poured herself a glass of whiskey. She downed it in one go, the burning liquid coursing down her throat but failing to extinguish the strange agitation in her heart. Judy, Lucas hugged her from behind. Forget about him. Divorcing is a good thing, right? We can. Lucas. Judy gently pulled his hand away. I want to be alone today. Lucas frowned, but I'll go on a date with you tomorrow. We can look at that car you like so much. Okay? Judy forced a smile. Once Lucas reluctantly left, Judy stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing into the night outside. After a long time, she took out her phone and called her assistant. Find out where Harrison is, she said in a hoarse voice, nearly overwhelmed by an inexplicable panic. Don't alert anyone. After hanging up, Judy's eyes returned to the divorce certificate. They both had agreed on this outcome from the start. So why did her heart feel so empty now? She recalled bits and pieces from the past 3 years. The porridge he'd make for her early every morning. The light he'd leave on when waiting for her to come home late. And the way he quietly cared for her, unable to hide his love. Damn it! She suddenly hurled the glass against the wall, shards scattering everywhere. It shouldn't be like this. Clearly, his leaving was supposed to be a good thing for her, right? Judy stood on the balcony, the night mist dampening the tips of her hair, but she didn't notice. Her assistant's call came at 2 a.m. Judy, I've got Harrison's address. She quickly lifted her head. Send it to me. Harrison's new apartment was in an old complex. No elevator, narrow staircases. Judy stood at the door, furrowing her brow, unable to imagine that the man who once enjoyed such a luxurious life would choose a place like this. She knocked, with enough force to show she was not to be turned away. Inside, there was a light rustle of footsteps, then the sound of the lock turning. Harrison opened the door, his pupils shrinking the moment he saw her. In simple loungewear, hair casually brushed, without trying hard to impress, he somehow drew attention. Judy's gaze lingered on him for a couple of seconds before she sneered. What? Living here is a show for me? Harrison's fingers tightened slightly, but his face remained calm. Do you need something, Judy? Need something? She scoffed, pushing past him into the room. The apartment is small, just a one-bedroom, but it's super clean. On the coffee table are a few design books and a steaming cup of floral tea. Judy glanced around, feeling even more inexplicably irritated. Got the divorce papers and hurried to move out? She turned around, looking down at him from above. What's the deal? Scared I'll change my mind. Harrison closed the door gently, saying calmly, You're kidding, Judy. Our marriage was just a contract. It's normal to divorce when the time's up. Normal? She narrowed her eyes and suddenly stepped closer. Then why didn't you take the check? Harrison looked up at her, his clear eyes pricking her heart. Don't need it, he said softly. I don't want to take anything that's Judy's. Judy's breath caught a bit. His words felt like a dull knife, slowly cutting into her chest. She stared at him, then suddenly laughed coldly. Harrison, do you think you can shake me off just because we're divorced? Harrison frowned slightly. What do you mean, Judy? Staring him in the eyes, she said deliberately, Come back. The spot as the white son-in-law is still yours. For a moment, the air felt thick. Harrison was momentarily stunned, then chuckled. Go back? For what? To keep being a shield between you and Lucas? What happens with him is none of your business. Right, none of my business. Harrison nodded, his eyes fixed on the flustered Judy. So, Judy, what standing do you have to ask me to go back? Judy was at a loss for words. Right, by what standing? They're already divorced. This realization left her strangely irritated. Harrison, her voice low, tinged with warning, don't test my patience. Harrison looked at her quietly, suddenly finding it a bit funny. 3 years and she hadn't changed. Always on a pedestal, always thinking he should follow her wishes. Judy, he raised his voice, we're done. Judy's pupils contracted sharply. Just then, her phone rang. Lucas' name on the screen was glaring. Harrison glanced at it, a faint smile on his lips. Judy, your darling's calling. Judy stared at him, laughed coldly, but still pressed the answer button. Judy, Lucas' voice came through. Where are you? I can't sleep. I'm thinking of you. Judy kept her eyes on Harrison, but softened her tone. I'm dealing with something. I'll be back later. Harrison turned away, no longer looking at her. Hurry up, Lucas urged. I'll be waiting. Hanging up, Judy looked at Harrison's profile, suddenly grabbed his chin, forcing him to face her. Harrison, her voice low, don't think it ends this way. With that, she let go, turned, and left. The door slammed shut, making the picture on the wall shake slightly. Harrison stood there for a long time before slowly wiping away a tear from the corner of his eye. Judy got into her car and hit the steering wheel with her fist. She didn't know why she was this out of control. They had agreed from the start, a divorce after 3 years. She loved Lucas, clearly. But why did his calm attitude make her so angry? Her phone rang again. Lucas sent a message. Judy, when are you coming back? She stared at the screen, suddenly feeling a wave of irritation. Finally, she replied, got things to do tonight, not coming back. Then she turned off her phone, leaned back in her seat, and closed her eyes. In her mind were Harrison's eyes, calm and almost indifferent. Harrison changed his address again. This new apartment was still small, but he used a friend's info to get it. He also asked his family to help, erasing all traces of him. Judy wouldn't find him anytime soon. His new place was small again, but full of sunlight. Standing by the window, looking at the bustling street below, he felt a long-lost sense of freedom for the first time. This time, he cut off all contacts, taking only his documents and a savings card. The expensive watches and designer clothes, he left them behind. All he wanted was a fresh start. He called his old friend, Mark. Harrison. Mark's voice came full of surprise. You finally called. Where have you been these 3 years? All I knew was you married into the Whites and then you vanished. Did the Whites hide you on purpose? I almost thought you disappeared. Harrison chuckled, it's a long story. Are you still doing design? Of course. My studio's quite popular now, Mark said with pride, then lowered his voice. Hey, are you reaching out because something's up? Harrison was quiet for a while. He still couldn't bring himself to talk about the past 3 years. Instead, he dodged the question and said, I want a fresh start and I need a job. Mark didn't hesitate for a second, then start at my studio tomorrow. Mark's studio was in an old office building downtown. It was simply decorated but had a strong artistic vibe. When Harrison pushed open the glass door, Mark came running over and hugged him. Man, you've lost so much weight. Mark squeezed his shoulder and casually waved it off, no worries. From today, you're my chief designer. Harrison looked surprised and frowned, shaking his head immediately. I'd rather start from the bottom. Mark wasn't having any of it and patted his shoulder. You were a genius in design back in college. I always wished you worked here, and now you're finally here. I can't let your talent go to waste. Harrison couldn't find words to protest anymore. He sat at his new desk, fingers lightly caressing the brand new drawing board. Felt like he was touching a long-lost dream. Before getting married, he loved nothing more than sitting in front of his drawing board, bringing his ideas to life. But 3 years of marriage kept him from his old companion. In the following days, he threw himself entirely into design. During the day, he learned the latest industry trends with the team. At night, he stayed up modifying drafts. His design style was unique, combining classic elegance with modern simplicity. Before long, he stood out in the studio's internal evaluations. A month later, Mark burst into his office excitedly. "Harrison, your Galaxy series got selected for the International Design Showcase." Harrison was stunned but couldn't hide his excitement. "Really?" "Absolutely," Mark said, waving the invitation, his voice 2 octaves higher with excitement. "It'll be showcased in Paris next month. You have to be there." Harrison took the invitation, his fingers slightly trembling. He'd always dreamed of his work making it to the international stage. He just didn't expect it to happen so fast. How many things had he missed in those long 3 years? At least now it wasn't too late for a fresh start. Unbeknownst to him, over at the Whites Group headquarters, Judy was flipping through the latest design magazine when her eyes froze on one page. Next to the design for the Galaxy series was the designer's name, HS. Her fingers unconsciously tightened, crumpling the paper. "HS," she repeated softly, her eyes dark and unreadable. Her assistant stood nearby, cautiously said, "Judy, this designer is an emerging talent with a unique style. They say." "Look into it," Judy interrupted coldly. "I want everything on this person." The assistant nodded and left, while Judy kept staring at the design. It was too similar. Those fluid lines, those details, even that understated yet powerful style. It all reminded her of Harrison's past work. After meeting him that day, she'd wanted to find Harrison again, only to find he had vanished. She'd asked her assistant to search, but they couldn't find him no matter what. Now she seemed to have a new lead. A coincidence? She murmured, feeling a restless unease. Outside, the night was deep, and the city's lights sparkled like a galaxy, but they couldn't fill the emptiness inside her. At the Whites Group headquarters, the boardroom was tense enough to choke. The financial director slammed the report on the table, his voice shaking. "Judy, the project loss is at $1.2 billion, and the bank's just frozen our working capital." Sitting at the head of the table, Judy furrowed her brows. 3 months ago, Lucas wanted to start his own fashion brand, and she approved huge funds without evaluation. Now the project had gone bad, partners were backing out, and the Whites funds were suddenly strained. "Contact the Swiss bank and mortgage some equity," she ordered coldly. "But that's the Whites' last resort." The financial director was sweating, and the board. "I said do it." Judy's sharp gaze silenced everyone. Meanwhile, chaos broke out at the Whites' old mansion. "What is this?" Maria stormed into the lounge with a handful of bank records, her well-maintained face twisted with anger. Lucas was lounging on the sofa playing video games. He looked up lazily at the disturbance. "Auntie, what brings you here?" Smack! A sharp slap landed on his face. "You little punk. How dare you use the Whites' money to buy a private island?" Maria shook the evidence in her trembling hands, and these jewelry auction records, all under Judy's name. Lucas held his face, his eyes instantly reddening. "I was only borrowing it for a bit. Judy said I could spend it however I wanted. That's the legacy of generations of the Whites," Maria shouted, shaking uncontrollably before clutching her chest and stumbling backward. The butler hurried to support her, yelling in a panic, "Ma'am, call an ambulance." As the ambulance sirens wailed in the distance, Lucas quickly sent a message. "Judy, Auntie's fainted suddenly. She seems to have misunderstood me." Outside the VIP hospital room, the veteran board members blocked Judy, who arrived in a hurry. "Judy, your mother's heart attack was due to that man." Bob pointed at the glass window to the room where Maria lay surrounded by tubes, "and now the group's cash flow has snapped. Are you still protecting the culprit?" Judy rubbed her forehead, her tone icy. "Lucas is kind. He'd never do something like this. I'll fix the funding issue." "Fix it? By mortgaging the family estate?" Director Lee slammed the table. "We've just found out that man registered a shell company in the Cayman Islands." The ward door suddenly opened, and Lucas rushed out with reddened eyes. "They're all wrongfully accusing me. I just wanted to help you lessen the pressure by learning to invest." Instinctively, Judy caught him and looked at the board members. "Where's the evidence?" The board members stayed silent. Lucas had already erased the transfer traces, and those overseas accounts couldn't be traced to him. That's enough. Judy shielded Lucas. We'll discuss the group's matters tomorrow. At the end of the hallway, Lucas had a slight smirk on his face. In the dead of night, in the CO office at the Whites, the assistant braced himself as he reported, "The Swiss bank is demanding we top up our margin in 3 days, or they'll execute a forced liquidation." Judy stood by the floor-to-ceiling window. The city's lights sprawled beneath her, but they couldn't illuminate the gloom in her eyes. Her phone lit up. It was a shopping list sent by Lucas, featuring the latest luxury sports car, priced as much as a house. She closed her eyes for a moment and hit the transfer button. The assistant hesitated before finally handing over a document. "There's one more thing. We found the temporary address of that designer, HS, in Paris for the design exhibition." Judy spun around quickly, and the documents scattered across the floor. The man in the photo, wearing a custom-made suit, stood on the exhibition stage. His features were striking. It was Harrison, who had been missing for 3 months. A thunderclap sounded outside. It started to rain. In the dazzling night of Paris, inside a 5-star hotel by the Champs-Élysées, an international business gala held by the International Design Association was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers refracted dazzling light. Amid the bustling crowd, a blend of elegance and elite mingling filled the room. Harrison wore a perfectly tailored suit. His hair was slicked back, and a limited-edition diamond-encrusted watch adorned his wrist, making him appear like a deity stepping out from the stars. Holding champagne, he engaged in lively conversation with several design directors from international brands, exuding confidence and poise with every gesture. "Harrison, your Galaxy collection is absolutely stunning," admired a French designer. "That flow of lines feels like wearing the Milky Way." Harrison smiled subtly, about to respond, when he suddenly sensed a sharp gaze. Turning his head, he frowned slightly. It was Judy. She wore a black mermaid gown, her expression cold and striking, eyes locked onto him like a falcon. Beside her, Lucas held her shoulder, dressed in a moon-white suit. His smile was composed but froze at the sight of Harrison. Harrison swiftly withdrew his gaze, maintaining a usual demeanor as he continued his conversation, seemingly unaware of them. Yet, Judy walked straight over to him. "Harrison." The designers around sensed the shift in atmosphere and discreetly stepped back. Harrison looked up, a polite yet distant smile on his lips. "Judy, long time no see. Are you avoiding me?" Judy's eyes held a trace of suppressed anger. Harrison chuckled softly, swirling his champagne. "Judy, you must be joking. We're divorced. What's there to avoid?" Judy's brow furrowed deeply. Behind her, Lucas approached quickly, affectionately wrapping an arm around Judy's shoulder and looking at Harrison in feigned surprise. "Well, isn't this Harrison? I didn't expect to see you here," he said, glancing up and down at Harrison and giving a slight chuckle. "Looks like you're doing well post-divorce, mingling in circles like these." Harrison's expression didn't change as he calmly glanced at Lucas. "Lucas, are you always talking nonsense? Being invited here means I'm qualified." Jealousy flashed in Lucas's eyes. "What qualifications could you possibly have? Did you use some special connections to get in here?" He deliberately emphasized the word special connections, drawing the attention of those around them. Judy frowned slightly, softly reprimanding, "Lucas, stop making a scene." Lucas pretended not to hear. "Judy, I'm just curious. Are you defending him now?" Clearly, Harrison used to be nowhere near the design circle. How did he suddenly become an emerging designer? "Can't I ask? Harrison, are you still mad about me and Judy?" "But it wasn't like you think. Judy and I were just friends then." Harrison's expression remained unchanged, his gaze steady on Lucas. "I'm not interested in your relationship with Judy, but it seems like you can't get over me, knowing so much about my past. Don't you know I was the top of my design class in college?" Lucas choked up, instinctively scoffing. "Who knows if you got that through connections?" Harrison calmly took a gold-embossed card from his bag and handed it to a well-known brand director nearby. "Since Lucas doubts my abilities, Why don't you all take a look at this? The director took the card, surprised. HS? You're the champion of this year's Milan design competition? A wave of astonished exclamations rose instantly. HS? If he's not qualified, who is? I was just thinking, I've never heard of this Lucas. He's probably the one who snuck in. Sounds like jealousy, doesn't it? Totally obvious Lucas complicated their marriage before and he's still denying it. Lucas's face froze, looking helplessly at Judy. No, it's not like that, Judy, I didn't mean it. Harrison smiled slightly, his gaze straightforward. Judy, Lucas, if there's nothing else, I'll be on my way. With that, he turned to leave. Judy pushed Lucas away, grabbing his wrist, and said with a deep voice, "We need to talk." Harrison stopped, glanced at her hand, and replied coolly, "Judy, please respect yourself." Judy's eyes darkened, but her grip didn't loosen. Lucas saw what was happening and quickly stepped up, taking Judy's other hand with a concerned look. "Judy, don't we have to meet Mr. Smith? Let's not waste time." But for the first time, Judy ignored him, keeping her gaze locked on Harrison's face. "Just 5 minutes." Harrison gently pulled his hand away and said indifferently, "Sorry, I have a meeting with my partners. Excuse me." With that, he turned and walked towards a group of international designers, his posture straight and his steps composed. Judy stood still, her eyes dark and intense. Lucas clenched his jaw, glaring at Harrison before turning to Judy in frustration. "Judy, what's his deal? Is he still blaming me or what?" Judy glanced at him, frowning slightly, her voice tinged with impatience. "You should go back." "What?" I said, "Go back." The impatience in her eyes was becoming more apparent. Tears welled up in Lucas's eyes. "Are you going after him?" But Judy didn't even look at him, just walked in the direction Harrison left. Lucas stood there, nails digging into his palms, eyes full of jealousy and hate. Meanwhile, Harrison was chatting happily with the designers, completely unaware of what was going on behind him, until a familiar figure approached. He then slightly turned his head and saw Judy standing there. "Harrison," she said softly, "I never said it was over between us." "Judy, I heard the Whites is having some trouble lately." Before Harrison could respond, Mark pulled him behind, eyes narrowing slightly. "Instead of bothering your ex, why don't you think about fixing your mess? Acting foolish over a man? I'm glad Harrison left you early." "What do you mean?" she questioned, suppressing her anger. "Did the board at your company not tell you?" Mark continued, "That guy with you, do you know what he's been doing behind your back? Are you still gonna play dumb?" The shimmering light from the champagne tower danced among the guests, and the lively violin couldn't mask the tense atmosphere in this corner. Mark swirled his champagne, a sarcastic smile on his lips. "Your precious company is almost drained by your so-called white moonlight, and yet you're here attending a party?" Judy's eyes darkened, her grip on the glass tightening. "Watch your mouth, Mark." "What? Did I say anything wrong?" Mark sneered, pulling Harrison further back. "The money Lucas has funneled from the Whites in the past 3 months could buy an island, right?" The nearby guests started to glance over, whispers starting to stir. Harrison frowned, gently tugging on Mark's sleeve. "Mark, let's go. He doesn't mind losing face, so why can't I speak up?" Mark's voice rose. "Judy, you messed up the company for a guy, and now you have the audacity to bother him?" Judy's face tightened as she grabbed Harrison's wrist. "We need to talk." "Let go of him." Mark slapped her hand away. "You've already got your divorce papers, Judy. What's this drama all about?" The guests' stares burned hotter, and some even raised their phones. Harrison took a deep breath. "Come with me." In the garden, the night breeze brought with it the scent of roses. The fountain's gurgling cut off the party's chatter, but the tension between the two was still clear. "Harrison," Judy's voice was hoarse, reaching out for him. "It's really not what you think." "Doesn't matter." Harrison stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Judy, we're done. I don't even care about the past now, but from now on, stay out of my life." "Harrison, there should be a limit to being ridiculous." She stepped forward, impatience creeping into her voice from his constant rejection. "I never wanted a divorce. Lucas was just alone and needed care." Can you stop being so jealous? A crisp slap startled the nightingale in the trees. Mark shook his numbed hand, sneering. Care? Is your care letting him squander company funds? Living in your marital home? Posting about the cars you gave him? There are many lonely people in the world. Why don't you take care of all of them? Judy tilted her head, her tongue brushing against her flushed cheek, eyes brewing a storm of fury. You don't understand, Lucas is different. He what? Mark cut in sharply. What's different? He's an orphan? He's alone? Mark took out his phone, scrolling heavily on the screen. See what your so-called white moonlight has been up to lately. Photos flicked across the screen. There was Lucas snuggled up to a rich older woman on a private yacht, then pushing chips towards a blonde at the casino. The most glaring photo was him with the competitor's daughter, entering a hotel just 3 days ago. No way. Judy's eyes widened in shock. She staggered back 2 steps. Why do you think he suddenly came back? Mark pressed. That gambling dad story? It's a lie. He racked up massive debts abroad and ran home to escape the mob. Harrison looked up suddenly, shaken. Judy's face was as pale as a sheet, veins pulsing on her forehead. You're lying. See for yourself, Judy, Mark urged. He patted Harrison's shoulder. Don't pretend you're just looking out for him. You just wanted them both. Didn't you? But Harrison pulled away, and now you're scrambling. Harrison, it's not like she says, Judy pleaded, looking at him, her voice strained. I didn't know about any of it. It doesn't matter. It's best if we have nothing more to do with each other. With that, Harrison pulled Mark away without another glance. Judy watched him leave, her eyes filled with pain. Shaking, she took out her phone and dialed her assistant. Find out everything about Lucas from the past few years. I need to know who's lying. Judy stood at the window, holding a freshly delivered investigation report. Outside, the rain was pouring down, smearing city lights on the glass. Hearing Mark's revelations, doubt crept in about Lucas. The first thing she did upon returning was get Lucas' travel records from her assistant. Are you sure this info's correct? Her voice was low and intense, like a storm was brewing. The assistant stood rigidly. I've checked 3 times. Lucas' mom's medical records were forged. That leukemia diagnosis? The doctor who signed it doesn't exist. Judy's knuckles turned white, crumpling the paper in her grip. Go on. We also found that Lucas was close with several rich women overseas. Here's his secret social media account, full of luxury bragging photos, dated when he claimed financial hardship. She picked up a tablet, seeing Lucas sporting a diamond watch, captioned, Thanks for the gift, babe. Love you. The date was during the week she mortgaged her house for his mom's treatment. Her eyes grew cold. Bring him in. Half an hour later, the office door swung open. Judy, Lucas walked in, a cheerful smile on his face. Calling me so late. You miss me? His smile froze seeing the scattered files on the desk. Slowly, Judy turned and pushed a photo towards him. Do you know this person? Lucas was cozied up with a stout middle-aged woman. The backdrop was a Las Vegas casino. This is... He trembled, lunging to grip her arm. Judy, let me explain. She's just a business partner of my cousin. She insisted on a photo. And this one? Judy tossed another photo, Lucas on a yacht in swim trunks, surrounded by 3 bikini-clad women. The date showed it was during his mom's supposed critical time. Lucas' face drained of color. And this? Judy played a recording, his brash voice echoed. Judy's easy to fool. I mentioned needing a bone marrow transplant for mom, and she jumped at it. Said I needed money, and she just gave it. Didn't even check the bogus project before funding it. Once we get that cash, we're off to the Maldives. No, that's not me. Lucas shouted, eyes bloodshot. Someone set me up. Judy, you gotta believe me. Judy suddenly grabbed his throat, her eyes blazing. Was the medical report fake too? Your mother isn't even sick. She. His eyes darted, and suddenly he broke free. So what if I fooled you, huh? The tears in his eyes dried up, replaced by a mocking grin. You think you're so special? Cold as an ice block. If not for your money, who'd want to play along? Judy's eyes narrowed dangerously. It was always about your money, he sneered, from the start. I wanted to be the white son-in-law, but you didn't measure up. So, I left with a big pile of cash to live it up. Pity it wasn't enough. But no problem. I just came back, snapped my fingers, and you ran back to me. My buddy was right, you're my loyal dog. You wanna die? Whoa, relax. Lucas leaned in provocatively, waving a USB drive from his bag. Don't forget, I know a lot about the whites. Like that recent illegal fund. Judy's fury froze. She instinctively reached for the USB. Lucas didn't care, even offered it closer to her. Judy, I'm unlike you. I always plan ahead. This? Just one backup. Guess how many I've made and where they are? Thunder crashed outside. Lightning revealed the raw malice in his eyes. If anything happens to me, the whites will go down too. In the top floor boardroom at the whites, the sky outside was dismal. Numbers rolled across the projector screen, cutting into the company's legacy like knives. Another limit drop, the CFO's voice shook. The banks just ended their partnerships and demand immediate loan repayment. All eyes turned to Judy, once full of admiration, now seething with anger and disdain. Judy! Bob slammed the table. Lucas spilled everything. And you owe us an explanation. Judy pressed her fingers against the table, veins popping. 3 days ago, Lucas threatened her and she let him go. He knew she wouldn't fund him anymore. So he hid, spilling all their secrets. Have you found him? Her voice, rough and strained. The assistant kept his head low. Last seen at the airport. Boarding records were erased. But his Swiss bank confirms he moved out the last $2 billion. Silence fell over the room. Judy suddenly grabbed her coat, heading out. Judy, where are you going? The board. Meeting's over. The elevator went directly to the underground garage. Judy sat in the driver's seat, and her phone lit up, showing Mark's studio address. When Harrison pushed open the studio's glass door, he immediately noticed a familiar figure at the reception desk, and his footsteps halted briefly. Judy's clothes were wrinkled beyond recognition, her once perfect hair now a mess. When she saw him, a fleeting look of desperation and hope crossed her eyes. Harrison. Hearing this, Harrison raised an eyebrow. He handed his umbrella to his assistant, keeping a calm tone. Got business, Judy? Judy swallowed hard. Can we talk privately? Let's do it here. Harrison signaled his assistant to leave, but didn't invite her in further. I've got a meeting in 5 minutes. Rainwater dripped from Judy's hair, leaving dark spots on the carpet. It struck her clearly that the man who always left a light on for her wouldn't even offer her tea now. You probably heard about the whites. Her voice was dry, and for the first time, she bowed her proud head. You were right. I shouldn't have indulged that man. I need the Smiths' resources now. Harrison laughed softly, lifting his head from a stack of papers. So, Judy's here for money? Not just money. Judy stepped closer. The Smiths have connections in business and politics. Only you might help me now. Help you? Harrison closed the file, his gaze as cold as ice. Did you forget? We're divorced. That sentence hit Judy like a slap to the face. She grabbed his wrist suddenly. When you were at the Whites, I was good to you. Help me this once. Name your terms. Harrison looked at her hand and suddenly smiled. Now you talk terms, Judy? Too bad. I'm not interested in saving the Whites. Harrison. Judy's voice trembled. She softened her tone. I'm begging you, will you? This woman who never begged now stood before him with red-rimmed eyes. For a moment, Harrison was dazed, recalling countless nights when he too waited desperately for her to come home. Begging? He chuckled. I once begged you many times too. But dear Judy, not all pleas get answered. That was true for me back then, and it's true for you now. Every question felt like a dagger in Judy's heart. She wanted to argue but found every word true. Judy. Harrison picked up his briefcase. I regret your situation, but it's not my responsibility. He walked towards the door with his back straight. Like you used to say, it was just a business marriage. Don't take it too seriously. With the sound of the glass door opening and closing, Judy stood dazed. The studio assistant rushed in. Harrison, the Milan Design Week tickets have been booked for the 10 a.m. flight tomorrow. Thanks. Harrison's voice faded. And make sure no unauthorized people are let in from now on. Outside, the rain poured harder. Judy's phone buzzed with a news notification. The Whites Group's stock plummets 60%. Founder Judy facing bankruptcy. She looked up towards where Harrison had left, and a phrase suddenly filled her thoughts. Stranded with nothing. Judy sat in her study. There was a gloomy rain outside. The TV screen was on, showing a special report on the Finance Channel. Emerging designer HS wins the Milan International Design Gold Award. His Starlight brand now valued at over $1 billion. On screen, Harrison in a white suit, smiling on stage. His eyes shone brightly, displaying confidence and ease. When reporters asked for his secret to success, he leaned into the mic and said softly, "The first step is to learn to love yourself." Judy's fingers tightened involuntarily, her fingertips trembling uncontrollably. It was reported that HS recently started the Harrison Foundation, dedicated to helping young entrepreneurs without capital. To date, they've helped over 300 young people achieve financial independence. The voice on TV became gradually indistinct. Judy stood up and stumbled towards the long-closed room where Harrison once lived. As she opened the door, a faint woody scent hit her, as if he'd just been there yesterday. The bedside had his half-used hand cream, the closet a few forgotten casual clothes. Judy absent-mindedly picked up a beige knit sweater, faintly carrying his scent. She suddenly remembered a winter 3 years ago. She worked late, and returning home she found Harrison in this very sweater, asleep on the sofa waiting up for her. When she walked in, he yawned and went to heat up porridge, accidentally burning his hand. Such incidents seemed endless in their 3-year marriage, yet she had been blind to them all those years. A door closing snapped her back to reality. The housekeeper stood hesitantly at the door. "Miss, the bank's called again. They said if the loan isn't paid by next week, they'll begin foreclosure proceedings." Judy nodded, signaling she understood. When the housekeeper left, she slumped into Harrison's chair. In the mirror was a weary face, eyes sunken, hair disheveled, far from the poised CEO of the Whites. Her phone buzzed with a message from Bob. "Judy, I've known you forever, so I'm giving you a heads up. The board's decided to remove you as chairperson next week. Take care." Judy laughed bitterly, her gaze falling onto a paper peeking out from the dresser drawer. Opening it, she found a journal. Harrison's neat handwriting filled with notes about her. March 15th, Judy's stomach hurt. Remember to make millet porridge daily. May 20th, allergy season. Keep her meds in the car. July 8th, our anniversary. Finally got her the bracelet she likes. It ended a week before their divorce. Tomorrow is Judy's birthday. The necklace I got for her finally arrived. Cake must be Black Forest. She doesn't like it too sweet and is allergic to peanuts. Hopefully, without my planning, they still remember. Judy's vision blurred suddenly. She suddenly remembered that birthday when Harrison gave her that necklace. She tossed it into the trash in front of everyone just to please Lucas. Now, thinking back, that necklace was a limited edition she mentioned liking once. The TV suddenly echoed with applause. Judy looked up, and there was Harrison being interviewed by international media. A reporter asked, "You've had a marriage before. Did that experience affect your career?" Harrison smiled slightly on screen. "I think it did affect me. At least that marriage taught me one important lesson. Never lose yourself for anyone." Judy abruptly turned off the TV. In the quiet room, the only sound was the rain tapping against the window pane. She looked at herself in the mirror, suddenly recalling Harrison's back on the day he left. His straight back and decisive steps showed no hint of hesitation. When did he make up his mind to leave? Was it when she decided to donate her bone marrow without a second thought? Or was it when she repeatedly chose Lucas over him? Or maybe it was when he faced challenges and criticism from her mother. Outside, the rain came down harder. Suddenly, the power went out at the Whites' villa, plunging the room into darkness. Judy just sat there in front of Harrison's vanity. When she lifted her hand, she felt the cold liquid on her face in the dark. She finally understood. The harshest punishment in this world isn't bankruptcy or being deserted by all. It's realizing too late that the person who once cherished you has become someone you can't even reach. But she didn't want to give up. Surely he used to love her so much. How could he just let her go because of these trivial things? Harrison, you have a meeting with the LVMH representatives at 10 a.m. and then a Fashion Week event at 3 p.m. I've got the material ready. Anything else you need? Harrison was about to respond to his assistant when he stopped, frowning at a familiar figure in the reception area. Judy stood there in a crumpled dress, holding 2 cups of coffee, dark circles under her eyes. When she saw him, her dull eyes suddenly lit up. Harrison. She quickly walked over, forcing a smile. I remember you like lattes with double syrup. Harrison's gaze lingered on the coffee for a second, his mouth curling into a sarcastic smile. Like it? Isn't that Lucas's preference? Judy's hand froze mid-air. Is there something you need? Harrison gestured for his assistant to leave, but made no effort to invite her in. I'm on a schedule. I just want to talk to you, Judy pleaded, her eyes showing a hint of desperation. Just 10 minutes. Talk about what? Harrison crossed his arms. How you squandered the White's last assets. Or your true love who took off with your money. But I'm sorry, I'm not interested in any of that. Her lips trembled. She suddenly grabbed his wrist. I know I was wrong, Harrison. I came to apologize. Give me one more chance, will you? Harrison jerked his hand away, letting out a cold laugh. Judy, now you know how to plead with me? Remember what you said when I pointed out there was a problem with Lucas? He looked her up and down, mimicking her voice back then. Lucas is kind. He couldn't have done such a thing? Judy's face drained of color. I lost my mind back then, but I swear nothing happened between us. That's irrelevant to me. Harrison turned to leave. Move. I'm running late. Wait. Judy blocked him, her words spilling out quickly. We used to be so good together. Why do you only remember the bad things I did to you? Remember? That year you had a fever. I stayed overnight at the hospital with you. And on your birthday, I skipped a meeting just to be with you. Harrison suddenly laughed, a chilling sound that made Judy shiver. The night I had a fever. Wasn't it because your dear Lucas caught a cold? You even had the doctor meant for me treat him just because he complained of chest pain. And that birthday you went with me to Paris because Lucas was there. Plus, it was you who booked the flight, making it seem like you were celebrating my birthday. Judy's lips quivered, her eyes filled with panic. I was a fool sometimes, but my kindness toward you wasn't entirely fake. Your kindness towards me? Harrison looked down at her. Was it when you gifted me a watch Lucas didn't want? Or spent a Christmas Eve outside his apartment the whole night? Judy fell silent, desperately clutching his jacket. But I really realize I'm wrong now. I love you. It's always been you. Love? Harrison flung her away, stepping back to keep his distance. Judy, you've only ever loved yourself. This lowly plea is just because the Whites needs the Smiths' connections to survive. No, it's not like that. Judy quickly defended herself. I'm not doing this for the Whites, it's because we truly love each other. Why are you being so stubborn? Harrison suddenly grabbed her coffee from beside her and threw it in her face without hesitation. The brown liquid dripped down her chin onto her expensive dress, causing the receptionist to gasp. Are you awake now? Harrison's voice was cold as ice. Looking at Judy in this state made him feel sick. Judy sat stunned on the ground, coffee trickling down her eyelashes. She watched his determined back as he walked away, suddenly remembering how a long time ago she had splashed him with cold water. Back then, he had looked at her with red eyes but still smiled and said it was okay. Now, he wouldn't even spare her a glance. Harrison's assistant hurried up to him. Harrison, should we call security? No need. Harrison pushed the elevator button without looking back. Just someone irrelevant. In a rainy night in Paris, Judy curled up on the bed of a cheap hotel in the St. Denis district. The wallpaper was moldy and peeling, the sheets stained with suspicious marks, and the neon lights outside cast shifting shadows on her pale face through the dirty glass. Her phone lit up on the nightstand, showing the 15th debt collecting message. If you don't pay within 48 hours, you'll be picking up your body. Shivering, she grabbed the half-empty whiskey bottle. The low-quality alcohol burned her throat while international news played on TV. A man was arrested in Switzerland for international fraud and money laundering, with a sum involving €3 million. The scene cut to the Geneva police station, showing Lucas in handcuffs, his carefully groomed curls now a mess. When a reporter asked about the whereabouts of the stolen money, he suddenly yelled at the camera, "Judy instructed me. All those project funds went through her." Crash. The whiskey bottle slipped from Judy's hands, spilling amber liquid onto the carpet. She stared at his twisted face on the screen, suddenly recalling their final confrontation 3 months ago in the office. "If anything happens to me, the Whites will die with me." And he really meant it. Her phone buzzed with an email from the bank. "The shares you mortgaged in the Whites are now under liquidation." This meant the century-old The Whites was about to change its name completely. There was a loud pounding at the door. "We know you're in there." A voice with a thick accent shouted with the sound of door smashing. "Open the door, or we'll burn down this dump." Judy wobbled to her feet, momentarily stunned by the reflection in the mirror. With sunken eyes and graying hair, her once $10,000 designer dress reeked with a sour odor. Was this still the commanding CEO of the Whites? The window glass suddenly shattered, and a firebrand was thrown in, flames quickly spreading up the curtain. Judy grabbed her coat and dashed out the door, immediately colliding with the gang collecting the debt. The leader, a burly man, grabbed her collar roughly, running away. "Huh? Why aren't you running now?" They pinned her against the wall, a cold blade pressed against her throat. "The boss gives you one last chance," he said with a breath stinking of alcohol. "I heard you pampered that Lucas? Get back the money you transferred to him for us, and we'll spare your life." Judy laughed hoarsely. "I'm also looking for him. Why don't you try the Geneva prison? Honestly, you've taken all I had." The blade cut into her skin, warm blood trickling down. Just as she felt like she might die in this filthy hotel, sirens drew closer. "Damn it! I said keep it quiet." The thugs cursed and scattered. Judy slid down the wall and sat on the floor, laughing until sobs burst through her fingers. "I was wrong. I really know I was wrong." On the same day, in a Geneva prison, Lucas huddled in the corner of the visitation room, his former arrogance and pride gone. When the guard informed him that no one was willing to hire a lawyer for him, he suddenly erupted, throwing water at the surveillance camera. "Do you know who I am? I am the future owner of the Whites Group." His scream echoed off the concrete walls. "When I get out, I won't let you off." The guard injected him with a sedative, expressionless. In the last vague moment before he passed out, Lucas saw a figure in the mirror. His hair dry like straw, eyes bloodshot, cheeks sunken, face ashen. The expensive bespoke suit long replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Was this really him? The once captivating figure who had swept Judy off her feet? The iron door clanged shut, darkness consuming all the resentful whimpering. At a Milan Design Week cocktail party, Harrison was in the middle of a conversation with several brand representatives when Mark tapped his shoulder from behind. "I want to introduce someone to you." He turned and saw a woman in a deep blue evening gown standing under the crystal lights. Her features were clear in the light. The eyes behind her gold-rimmed glasses had a warm smile. "This is my sister, Tiffany," Mark said, winking. "Just moved back from Geneva. She's an international lawyer specializing in protecting rights for the disadvantaged in marriage cases." "I've heard a lot about you, Harrison." Tiffany extended her hand, her fingertips warm and dry. "I've seen your Nirvana series designs. Those shattered, reassembled lines are stunning." Harrison was slightly taken aback. Most people favor the Star River series. Few like the Nirvana series, and even fewer grasp the metaphors within, those years crushed and reborn from marriage. "Do you know about design?" Harrison asked. "Just appreciate beautiful things." She smiled, handing him a business card, her fingertip unintentionally brushing the scar on his inner wrist, a reminder of the whip mark from the Whites family shrine. Harrison instinctively jerked his hand back, but then he heard her softly say, "The direction of the scar is just like the craftsmanship in your engravings." The party's noise suddenly faded into the background. For the first time in 3 years, someone looked at his scar not with pity or curiosity, but as if admiring a piece of art. 3 months later, Harrison stood at the unveiling ceremony of the Harrison Foundation. Reporters were gathered below, and Tiffany, his legal advisor, was by his side. Whenever he got caught in tricky questions, she helped him out with the perfect legal terms. Harrison, there's a rumor you're setting up this foundation to get back at your ex-wife. Was her company's bankruptcy you're doing? As Harrison was about to speak, a slender, fair hand took the mic. The charity law has clear regulations, Tiffany said calmly. A foundation's establishment requires a rigorous review by the Ministry of Civil Affairs. Are you questioning our country's judicial fairness? The reporter was instantly silenced. After the event, Harrison found a warm cup of grapefruit tea in the lounge. A note was pressed under the cup. You did great today. Ignore the gossip. I'll always be here with you, Tiffany. He held the cup, remembering how his assistant said Tiffany had skipped an important meeting just to be there. Through the steam of the tea, he glanced at her as she sorted through documents. Her gentle eyes always showed affirmation towards him. On a late autumn night, as Harrison worked overtime modifying design drafts, the office suddenly went dark. Don't be scared, came Tiffany's voice from the darkness. I have a light on my phone. The moment the faint light appeared, he saw her eyes filled with concern. Why are you here? He asked. Mark said you've been working late a lot. I wanted to check on you, she replied, holding up a thermos. Soup from the housekeeper to keep your stomach warm. Harrison felt a sudden rush of warmth. Once, he too had waited with soup for someone who never came home on time. Tiffany, he said seriously for the first time, why are you so kind to me? In the dark, her fingers gently lifted, only to restrain themselves again. Because you're worth it, there's no other reason. At the same time, in a Beijing nursing home, Judy, classified as mentally unstable and sent back to the country, stared at a financial magazine featuring the pair standing together. Her fists clenched. A small headline in the corner stung her eyes. Rumored romance between Tiffany and Star River found her exposed. She frantically called the number that had long been blocked, only to have a nurse take her phone away. Judy, it's time for your meds. As leaves fell outside the window, she recalled years ago a man waiting for her to turn back. Now Star River still shone bright, but no longer illuminated her night sky. In a special care ward at hospital, the smell of disinfectant filled the air. Maria leaned against the bed, her frail fingers caressing an album of photos from when Harrison married into the Whites. Back then, he was clad in simple elegance, bowing to pay respects to the ancestral shrine. Ma'am, Harrison is here, the butler quietly announced. Maria quickly looked up. As the door opened, Harrison walked in, wearing a brown coat, hair perfectly neat. He'd changed, his past eagerness replaced by calm assurance. Maria struggled to get out of bed but stumbled, collapsing to the floor. Harrison instinctively stepped forward but stopped himself. Maria clung to his coat hem, tears streaming down. I'm sorry, my son. Harrison looked at this once prestigious woman who had whipped him, now fragile at his feet. He bent to help her and she clutched his wrist. This is what was meant for the white son-in-law, Maria said, trembling as she removed a jade ring, trying to place it on him. But Harrison pulled his hand away just as the jade touched his skin. The ring fell, shattering into 2 pieces. Forgotten, have you? He looked down at the 2 shattered pieces with a hint of indifference in his eyes. On the 3rd day of our marriage, you said I was too petty to deserve this ring. Maria stopped crying, instantly recalling how she handed the ring to Lucas in front of the entire family that day. Damn him, she wailed, clutching his clothes. He deceived Judy and ruined the Whites. Do you really think all this is Lucas's fault? Harrison interrupted her. And everything that happened, you want to say you had no idea about it? Wasn't it your silent consent? Maria was breathing heavily, dodging the topic as she pulled out a file from under the pillow. This is the Whites' last 5% equity. Just help Judy, she pleaded. So that's your goal, huh? He pushed the file back, shaking his head. You begged me with your life to come see you, thinking I'd feel sorry seeing your miserable state and then help you? Too bad. The hole in the whites is too big. I won't deal with this mess. No, it's not like that. Maria's eyes turned red. Harrison, after all those years together, don't you have any heart? Don't you know me best? Harrison straightened his coat, ready to leave. I've settled the medical bills. Consider it a thank you for the 3 years you took care of me. Is that enough? Maria felt a strong metallic taste rising in her throat. She swallowed it down and grabbed Harrison's bag strap. Harrison, as a favor to Mom, at least go see Judy. No need. When he closed the door, he heard the monitor inside start to wail longingly. Medical staff rushed in, but he took 2 steps back, ultimately not looking back. The next morning, the news of Maria's death reached his ears. Harrison, are you going to check it out? Tiffany handed a cup of hot tea to Harrison. If you want, I can join you. No, not necessary. I have this design draft to finish, no time for irrelevant stuff. Noticing the person next to him fall silent, Harrison slightly turned his head. Tiffany, do you think I'm too cruel? No, Harrison, I only think you're courageous. Harrison, will you marry me? Amidst the sea of flowers, Tiffany knelt on one knee, holding a simple diamond ring. Mark stood beside them, grinning with his phone out to record. Harrison was stunned for a moment, then smiled. So sudden? When we confirmed our relationship half a year ago, I started planning this. Tiffany said seriously. I've made up my mind. My partner for the future is you. It can only be you. From the moment we met, we clicked. We work together, have similar tastes, and love each other deeply. I can't think of any reason to wait. Harrison turned his head slightly, his eyes glistening. Tiffany was right. Being with her always felt easy. Whenever he got sick, she'd drop everything to take care of him. When he hit a design roadblock, she'd stay up until 3 a.m. with him. She'd take him around for inspiration and always had his back. Harrison, stop daydreaming. Mark was nervous from the vibe. Your decision matters. I'm not here to pressure you. If you're not ready, yes. Mark's voice got cut off as he threw his arms tightly around Harrison, who was just about to reach for Tiffany's ring. This is great, Harrison. We're going to be family now. Tiffany's hand holding the ring froze, scowling at her impulsive brother. Then she looked at Harrison, eyes filled with joy. On the wedding day, Mark adjusted his suit and got teary-eyed. Harrison, make sure you're happy. Harrison chuckled, though his eyes were wet too. What? You're worried about your sister marrying me? No, I'm just so happy. When the organ played the wedding march, he saw Tiffany trembling slightly at the altar. When asked if she was willing, she blurted out a yes so fast that the guests burst into laughter. During the bouquet toss, Harrison and Tiffany deliberately threw it back hard. The bouquet flew in an arc, brushing past the last pillar in the church. A bent figure, wearing a hat and mask, tried to dodge it. What's up? Tiffany followed his gaze. Nothing. Harrison leaned down to kiss his bride. I just saw wrong. A few days later, at a sanatorium on the outskirts of Beijing. Judy, your account balance is running low. The nurse handed her a bill. If you can't pay by tomorrow, we'll have to ask you to leave. Judy took the bill numbly. Since the Whites went bankrupt and her mother passed away, she'd been staying there. Once a business elite, now she couldn't even afford basic care. Dragging a suitcase, she walked out of the sanatorium's entrance. On the street, a large screen broadcast financial news. Harrison, creator of the Galaxy series, recently announced his marriage, pushing company valuations to a new high. On the screen, Harrison beamed, the ring on his finger gleaming. Beside him, Tiffany leaned gently on his shoulder. They looked perfect together. Judy stood frozen on the street as rain soaked her clothes, recalling how Harrison once smiled at her like that, yet she never cherished it. Rain mixed with tears streamed down her face, and Judy realized the Harrison she once knew finally had his true happiness. She had forever lost the person who loved her the most.